which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Manager, call the roll. Yes. Councilperson Clure.
Here.
Councilperson Redmond.
Here.
Mayor Stackflesh.
Here.
Councilperson Collins.
Here.
Councilperson Stearns.
All right, with that complete, we'll move on to the first order of business, the proclamation of the 17th annual Read Across Siskiyou event sponsored by First Five Siskiyou Children and Families Commission. I will read this from the desk here. Whereas the ultimate goal of the First Five Siskiyou Children and Families Commission is that all of Siskiyou's children from prenatal through 5 years of age will be healthy, ready to learn, and supported in safe, nurturing families and communities. And whereas children in Siskiyou County from prenatal through 5 years of age have a successful start in life through daily reading with supportive and nurturing families, caregivers, educators, and community leaders. And whereas early literacy is the foundation for academic, social, emotional, and economic success. And whereas First Five Siskiyou is in partnership with Siskiyou County Library, dedicates one day each year to promote early literacy by providing the same title book to read by guest readers to children in various preschools, kindergartens, child care settings, libraries, and online events throughout Siskiyou County on the same day, and provide each child with a copy of that book to take home. Therefore, the City of Mount Shasta hereby proclaims November 13th, 2024, as the 17th anniversary of Read Across Siskiyou, and be it that this body enthusiastically endorses daily reading, singing, and playing with children as a critical foundation for healthy development and lifelong success. And I will now introduce the First Five representative.
Thank you so much. I'm Karen Potts, and I'm the Executive Director for First Five Siskiyou Children and Families Commission and a community member of this wonderful community. So thank you truly for your service and for what you do for our beautiful city. As this is the 17th annual and the last 17 years, which is crazy to believe, you've helped us adopt the proclamation that was started by Dr. Steve Perlman. Some of you may know him from his time in McLeod and other areas in our county. As we all know, literacy is key to not just successful child development, but also the prosperity of communities. How well people read and how informed they are, it is a direct correlation has a direct correlation to community success and life success. So we really appreciate you taking the time to consider adopting this proclamation, and thank you to Councilwoman Clure for being a guest reader this year. We'd love for you to read any other time if anybody else is interested. We really appreciate your help. And Councilman Collins, I have 2 books for you because I think you have a new baby that's coming soon too. So, or a grandbaby that's coming soon too. So that's it. We're super excited. This is some of you who may be new may not know that for the last 25 years, First Five Siskiyou has invested consistently in programs and services in Siskiyou County, including Mount Shasta. Actually, Mount Shasta was one of the first communities where first $5 were invested 25 years ago. So we're committed to this community. Some of the ways that we're investing in the community will look different as new opportunities come. We have a vision to create a community space that's available to children on a regular basis. There is some conversations about the potential of starting a children's museum type of a thing that we'd love to talk with you more about. But for now, we're here to support children and families, and we're here committed to offering whatever the resources that we have directly to Mount Shasta and every other community in Siskiyou County. Thank you.
And thank you. It's a great program, and it is our honor, and I think I speak for everyone, to proclaim this the Read Across Siskiyou Day. So with that said, I think we're all going to get a package, and we appreciate that and all the work that you're doing for certainly. Reading is fundamental. That was the statement I grew up hearing.
RIP. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so while we're going through this handout, I'm just going to remind, we're going to public comments, and public comments are a chance for people in the audience to speak for 3 minutes on subjects not on the agenda. However, they can talk about subjects in the consent agenda if they're so interested. So with that being said, is anyone interested in addressing non-agenda items right now? Come on up, give your name and the city you live in.
My name is Marnie Roth, and I live here. So my message is, it has come to my attention the Mount Shasta police recently committed police brutality on an Indigenous man. Wow. It wasn't enough that Mount Shasta police killed a young man last year on Christmas morning on the train in town. That young man was unarmed, afraid, and had no drugs in his system and was having a crisis. All body cam footage on Facebook showed was a sleeping man, which should have been the cops' cue to de-escalate. The man is clearly showing his intent to disembark the train. Instead, the cops started to escalate, but a lawyer and a jury in federal court will dissect that video. What these two men had in common was a mental health crisis. Both men needed a calm talk down, sensitivity, and an understanding of mental health crisis situations. What is wrong with cops here? It is obvious that their training is lacking. The requirement for officers to always prioritize establishment of command presence, quote unquote, as the first step is ridiculous. Why do these interactions have to result in death and police brutality? Many cities and counties are paying out large lawsuits because of police brutality. Mount Shasta is on the way. Local taxpayers don't want this. Maybe we felt insulated for a while, but the big lawsuit payouts are coming here. Police brutality is already here. Next comes tax dollar payouts to cover for untrained police. Ugh. Thank you.
And thank you. All right. Anyone else in the audience? All right. So seeing as we have no other interested parties, we'll move on to the next item. Let me have that for a second. I lost my place here. All right. Council and staff comments. We'll start with the city manager as usual.
Okay. So the big things, as reflected in the agenda tonight, relate to the approval of the infrastructure finance plan and the enhanced infrastructure finance district for the city of Mount Shasta. Been working very closely with Cosmont on making sure that we have all the documentation that we need to submit to the state tax franchise board, and to ensure that we're following the very detailed letter of the law to ensure that we're ready to send all of our information to the Franchise Tax Board, so then we can move on our way, if we pass our resolutions tonight, towards Mount Shasta's formation of our EIFD. The second piece is related to the landing. We've talked a lot about what's happening, the site being tied up by Pinsino Holdings as the developer on the site. Had a long conversation with an expert at Cosmont, a gentleman named Brian Moncrief. And one of the things when you dispose of municipally owned property is that you need to navigate the Surplus Lands Act. And it's pretty complicated, but essentially HCD is the arbiter of the disposal of public lands. And if you wanted to seek an exemption from going through the process, which at minimum takes a year, you have to show that you're building enough affordable housing. To meet an exemption for the landing, any site, you have to show that you're building either a minimum of 300 affordable units or 10 times the number of acres that you have for sale, which in this case, we're talking about 85 acres approximately. That's 850 units. And clearly that's not the direction we want to go, so we need to navigate that process. So what I provided to Cosmont and their expert is a list of what we need to, all of the documents related to the MIA appraisal for the property, the agreed upon verbal agreement on sales price, the maps, anything that we have, and a list of things that we want to see accomplished. And they're going to provide a scope of work and a proposed cost to carry us through a very complicated process to ensure that we're not wasting any time. At minimum, we need to go through a 6-month RFP process to pull in some type of affordable housing developer. And, in talking to Pinsino Holdings, the main developer, they're not particularly interested in the affordable piece. A big local developer in the North State, K2 Development, is, because they're very sophisticated in bundling low-income housing tax credits, PLHA, low-income housing funds, other things. So when we go out for an RFP, we've got to give everybody a fair shake, but given the ability of this group to be nimble and their ability to manipulate a whole host of funds that are available out here, we have a feeling and we have an agreement on K2 that they would like to come in and take that role on, but we still need to go through this process. And then once we go through the RFP process, HCD will sign off on that, and there is a lot of other information we need to provide to them, and for them to give us our certificate, it's about a year. And I notified Pinsino Holdings. They're not thrilled, but they also kind of knew this was going to happen, and so they're planning accordingly. And and this is just kind of, it's not agendized, but we got a request from the Sisson Museum saying they normally receive an annual donation from the city in the amount of $5,000. And I don't remember having it on the agenda. I could have a faulty memory. I'm just wondering if I need to agendize that for the next meeting.
We'll put that on later today.
Okay. Is that
That's
standard?
normal. Yeah,
okay. And finally, a lot of folks up near the old hospital are pretty upset about the conditions at the site. We finally have Bay Area Receivership Group, who owns the property, in gear. We have a meeting on site next week to finally come up with a timeline for fully remediating that property and getting it back on the market.
So that that means the cleanup will happen when?
Well, we need to.
That's a pretty hot topic around town. Yeah.
It is. And what we need to do is meet on site. And I want to be careful. Bay Area Receivership Group's project manager, I'm trying to apply pressure to ensure expediency in getting this cleaned up. So I've pulled in John Noreen, who's worked closely with Ryan Griffith, their attorney, to ensure that they're not slow walking this because they're trying to recoup their losses in taking us through receivership, and to ensure that if we need to, we're going to start finding Bay Area Receivership Group like any other delinquent property owner if they don't move on this.
All right. Are you complete?
Yeah,
Okay.
unless people have questions.
Okay, we're good. So Melissa, do you want to speak now? Or you're good? Okay, and Jeff, you have an item. Do you have any other things to talk about? You're good? Okay. Council members, gentleman to my left? Nope. Jeff? Nope. Am I right? Nope. All right. I don't have anything to say right now. There's a lot of things going on. So many pending items, whether it's a cleanup of a hazmat site or retrieving funds or developing properties. It's all very much pending and so forth. You have a question?
Yeah, actually I do. Thanksgiving is coming up soon. There's typically Winter Magic the day after Thanksgiving. Perhaps you can give us an update on that if you have information.
Yeah, I don't have the full details on it. I have, I met with a DIAC who's really spearheading that, that work. Without getting into the details from them, they're on track and it's moving forward, and the chamber's on board and they have the funds they need.
Ms. Clore, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I can get more information, but
I can pull up the exact.
So those in the audience, we're talking about the event the Friday after Thanksgiving that Mount Shasta has called Winter Magic. Mm-hmm. It's pretty standard. I don't think we might have missed one at COVID, maybe. We missed it the COVID year. That was about it. Usually it goes on. Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, the day after Thanksgiving, that Friday, 10 a.m. is the Ugly Sweater Run. From 1 to 8, there will be downtown festivities with vendors. From 1 to 5 will be horse carriage rides. And at 6 o'clock will be the Holiday Light Parade, and Santa will light the tree.
thank you.
It's usually...
I'm sorry, tree lighting is when?
At 6.
6, okay.
All right, that sounds like the usual program. And yes, as I was saying, there's a lot of things going on in the city, but we do have a pretty full agenda here. And so I'm going to move on to updates on committees. We just had downtown enhancement. Anything else like that?
That's it. It's DIAC. And,
Okay.
They hit the highlights. I was waiting on a quote from Jesse Ramirez. They've been DIAC. They in that. Is been looking for somebody to mount the Flower of Life statue, and Jesse Ramirez is on. Jake Pritchard sent me a quote today, and I think we're ready to okay it and get it in motion.
All right, and then I'll speak about the Library Tax Advisory Committee. We have 2 meetings next week.
Yep.
One's Wednesday, one's Thursday next week,
Yep.
to get clarification on size, scope, costs of the library expansion.
Yep.
So we're moving along there. It's been a little choppy, folks, but it is moving forward. Beautification, nothing.
Ad hoc committee this week on next steps for Castle Creek.
Right.
Daylighting
And that's Thursday.
Yep.
Okay. So with that all said, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All right, consent agenda, item number 7. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes for the October 28th, 2024 meeting, B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable 2023 and October 23 and November 5th, 2024. Total gross payroll and taxes for period ending October 27th, 2024. C, second reading and adoption of an ordinance amending Mount Shasta Municipal Code, Chapter 12.34 to clarify provisions related to sidewalk dining, that's CCO-24-08. Entertain a motion.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through C, including CCO-24-08.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
And aye. Any opposed? 5-0 vote?
Yep.
All right. So next is a public hearing on CDBG block grant funds programs, two programs in particular. I will let Melissa Dodd, our finance director, introduce this, and then this really is about the public coming up to speak, if they are so inclined, about the programs.
Thank you. Brandy from Great Northern Services is actually here to speak about the grants that they're administering with us.
Didn't see it.
I'm Brandy Caparoso, Community Development Manager with Great Northern Services. Quentin with the EDC is also here. He was instrumental in the grant administration of this. So as we generally know, in the second public hearing, it is, let me get this because I can never remember what it says. It's to allow the public to make comments on the two projects we had, 20 CDBG CV23 94, which is the food subsistence program, and 20 CDBG CV2 106, the subsistence payment program. And then I'll go through what those programs did. So, for the food bank program, if you remember COVID, there was a lot of money coming in during COVID, and the CDBG program was no different. The jurisdictions, all the jurisdictions were allotted two different tranches of money. One was the CV1 and one was the CV2. The 2-3, this is for the 2-3 closeout. And so all the 10 jurisdictions pooled their funds because doing one jurisdiction doing their own individual things, it just wasn't enough money to really make an impact for the community. So this program was the food assistance program, and what happened was that Quentin very graciously, probably kicking and screaming the whole way, wrangled all the jurisdictions to pull that money and do all the MOUs and everything that was involved in getting that together. And what Great Northern did was we distributed fresh and frozen protein in opposite months of our commodities program. So in 1 month, say in Mount Shasta, they got the commodities, and the next month they got the fresh and frozen protein. And that consisted of fresh eggs, fresh produce, frozen hamburger, frozen chicken, that type of items that actually are very important for health. And the commodities program, what gives you food is not sometimes necessarily the best quality of food. So we did this for 20 consecutive months, January 2022 through August 2023. There were some funds left over, so we distributed fresh and frozen protein through our 11 distribution sites with the commodities program. So we didn't have to go out separately, and because it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of funds to do that. So if you do it all at once with the program, then it's a little bit more expeditious. We do have on the handout, it does list the whole 11 sites that we went to. And that was throughout Siskiyou County. And then the table represents the contribution made by each jurisdiction. The city of Doris had some extra funding left over from their CV1, CV2, 3 grant that they kind of pulled out. They assisted with this grant, but they pulled out kind of a little carving for themselves for CV1 for their micro enterprise program, and I believe you guys had as well. But they had some funds left over, so they helped with 1 month and a little bit of a second month. So the total number of people served was 6,171 people were provided with fresh protein and produce for just the program that Mount Shasta did, not including what Doris did for April. The total number of people served, which I think is the big impact, and it's the big number, is about 20,000 people. So, because you could go multiple times, families could go multiple times to multiple locations. There was no restriction. There was also no restriction. If somebody needed food, if they were over income, they could receive food. So we couldn't, and if they were from out of the area, we couldn't deny them food because it was COVID. So it did have a pretty big impact. And there was only a couple of people that self-identified as over income, and it was very negligible in that. So we felt it was a really good program. And we are going to try to do that again with the county and do that through, I believe you guys have approved the MOU? Yep. Okay. Or at least the, so we're going to be trying to do that again. We're applying for that again because we had really good feedback on it. The second program was the subsistence payment program. That helped with rent. After the Housing is Key was finished, it helped with rent. It helped with mortgage. It helped with energy assistance on top of the LIHEAP program that Great Northern does, or broadband access. So it was to keep people housed during COVID. It made a big difference in people's lives. There were 1,641 people served for a total of 2,410 times. And that was for the overall program. Mount Shasta ran out of money, and then Dunsmuir picked up several more months of that. And we did that for 24 months. The total payments were $1.3 million. For Mount Shasta, and this is what we'll report to HCD, there were 514 households served with that had 1,267 people in them for a total of 1,886 payments for just under $1 million. So that had a great impact, and we're still getting calls. Do you have rental assistance? We're like, nope, sorry. So that was another great program. Which we'll probably not be doing again unless a jurisdiction really finds that they need that help.
Good evening. My name is Quentin Gaddy. I'm the Director of Business Development for Siskiyou Economic Development. I run the Small Business Development Center. Food banks and subsistence payments aren't really in my wheelhouse. It's not really what I do for a living, but it was at a time of emergency, so we did step up to administer the programs. I just want to say some thank yous to some staff in particular. I know she's retired, but Muriel, really, we could not have had this program without Muriel. It was just an absolute mountain of paperwork that was involved. Priscilla LaRue also was instrumental in this program and helped out a lot. Well over $2 million flowed through the city of Mount Shasta, so this did have a significant fiscal impact on the city. I mean, just grant awards of a loan were enough to trigger single audit requirements. And this, took a substantial amount of staff time and whatnot, so we are very appreciative that Of all the 10 jurisdictions in Siskiyou County, that Mount Shasta was the one to step up to do this. Your staff was incredibly easy to work with. There's lots of times when we were going back and forth with HCD on either financial reports or documentation or program materials, and it was always real easy working with Mount Shasta. Nothing was ever lost. Nothing ever fell by the wayside. So, the fact that the city was able to step up and be in that position during this emergency was very helpful. I will note this was a program that was approved in the CARES Act, which was passed in March of 2020. We didn't get contracts until September of 2021. So this was really, really a long haul just to even get this up. But as Brandy mentioned, this helped so many households in the county. People who are really struggling, and so it really meant a lot for that. So I just want to say thank you, in particular to the staff who made this program happen.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay. No, I just wanted to comment. I am pleasantly surprised at the scope and size of the program. I didn't realize the numbers were that large. So sounds like it was a success. So congratulations on accomplishing this program. And good luck with the next one. You're going to do one of the two. I heard that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. So good luck with the next one. And any comments before we open the public hearing? No. All right. So officially, the public hearing is now open. Would any of the audience members, of which we have 3, like to come up and comment? On this? No, on this. Your chance to talk freelance came and went. Okay. All right, counting down. All right, seeing as we have no one interested in speaking, we will close the public hearing at this point. And unless Brandy has something else to do or say, we move on. Okay, so we have officially concluded this item. It's number 9. We're moving on to number 10. That was number 8, and we're moving on to number 9. So here we go. Public hearing regarding consideration of ordinance CCO-24- number to be decided, amending Mount Shasta Municipal Code, Title 18 zoning, adding Chapter 18.5, objective design standards. Before I introduce the planning director for background and so forth, if I'm not mistaken, this has been developing for years. So before you got here. So this is the fruition of many years of work, and hopefully we're coming to a conclusion on it. So, Planning Director Jeff Mitchum.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'll spend 90 seconds going over the staff report, pause, gauge your interest in going deeper into the standards themselves. So to start with, to clarify, this is the consideration of an ordinance to amend the municipal code to add a whole new chapter, 1850, called Objective Design Standards. The recommendation before you is to conduct this public hearing, introduce the ordinance, waive its reading with findings of a categorical exemption called the common sense exemption. There are some regulations cited in detail in the attached resolution or the attached ordinance. In the way of background, I just want to maybe go half step back and remind you all that this body on January 8th of 24 adopted the 2331 housing element and amended it again on the August 12th of 24. That was in response to HCD's review to specifically approve multifamily housing by right subject to these objective design standards. So that's the resource within here that we're going to be applying to all future multifamily housing projects by right. There is some detail that I won't go into now, and I'll after I pause and go around to see if you've got detailed questions, I can highlight that mechanism by which we will approve. So it's slightly nuanced. I want to be clear that currently the zoning districts that permit or allow multifamily housing are R3, C1, and C2 only. Okay, so we're leaving R1 alone and the other non-housing zones alone. The Planning Commission conducted 8 public hearings, to the mayor's point. On October 15th of 24, they appointed 3 members of the Planning Commission and myself as the Objective Design Standards Subcommittee to produce these standards, to refine them pursuant to Planning Commission and public comments. That took place over roughly 8 months. As I mentioned, the findings herein allow you to determine that this municipal code amendment does not have the potential to cause a significant impact to the environment, and it's hereby found to be exempt. I want to point out that in next steps, Planning Commission is going to be reviewing at their next regular meeting next Tuesday the implementation package that is the consequence of having a certified housing element. So the clock is now ticking on about 24 programs within that chapter of our general plan that require us to make measurable progress with a specified time frame from as little as immediate to annually to multi-annually over the course of the next 8 years, which is the 6th cycle of the housing element. I can go into a little detail if you'd like to know more about what those are. I'm happy to go there with you. I've got some detail if you want to go there. I also am prepared to go into categorically the contents of the standards if you'd like me to go there, but rather than spend what would really take me a good 15 minutes at minimum to give you a high altitude overview, I'm going to pause, ask for procedural questions of clarity, and any prompts that you all have to go deep. So I'll pause right now. Yeah.
All right, so questions? Mrs. Stearns.
All right, I believe that I have just 4.
Okay, excellent.
4 more. Page 39, 18.50.010, sub I 1B, waivers. Can you give some examples?
Yeah, so waivers, concessions are for affordable housing projects, and those are granted by statute, by state law. That's no change. We're not proposing to change those, but it is fair to allow an affordable housing project a certain proportion of concession and waivers based on the degree of affordability. There's a formula. We apply that formula. The state regulates that provision. Our hands, this body, and staff's hands are off of that decision. To your question, specifically about adjustments to standards for non-deed restricted affordable housing or market rate projects, we have one simple stipulation that energy code or building code generally is the only justification for waivers to these standards. And the reason is simple, that every 3 years the building codes are updated. This document will follow that cycle. So our general plan is typically a horizon project of 20 some odd years. Chapters get updated. The housing element gets updated every 8 years. We can certainly amend that document, but we usually get the building code, which resolves more pressing matters for life, health, safety at the framing level, the energy level, the structural level, and so on. Fire code, and residential code, and energy code specifically. Within those documents, there are possible changes that could conflict with some of the provisions here. If that's the case, building code only can be cited as justification for changing some of these standards. Examples include energy code, which is Title 24, has performance-oriented energy modeling that would drive window coverage and glazing percentages on building walls. We have specific standards in here, which are 20% and 30% and 60% numbers for glazing windows facing front streets and side streets. The reason is simple. You don't want blank walls facing streets. If, for example, energy code came along and they were produce that documentation that says, for us to meet this performance energy modeling, we need to drop that number or change that number or move that number around, given a south-facing building wall, for example. We would grant that concession. Fire code potentially could have standards related to separation between buildings. We do have some of our what we call cottage court and pocket neighborhood typologies here. We have standards about how far those buildings are separated from one another. Clustered small-scale cottage industry is the context architecture here, so we're trying to encourage development to occupy that building mass. But if building code were to come along and say, hey, we got to move this and change some separation standards, we'd consider that and probably grant it if the justification could be made by fire code. Wall offsets are another example, staggered between vertical wall planes. We have a 3-foot standard for building face to garage face. It's possible that could move by a few feet one way or the other, hopefully further away, not closer. We would probably grant in that case. Residential code does get into wall standards, roof assemblies, which could change glazing percentage again and have impacts or implications to roof form. So that might change a little too. Also within Chapter 2 of the Residential Code, there's information relating to building planning, which touches a little bit on snow load and stormwater retention detention. And we've got site standards that would probably bump up against some of those standards as well.
Number 3.
You asked.
I did. Thank you, I appreciate it. On page 47, paragraph 2.1, materials. It looked to me like grass is not allowed. Is that true or not true?
We defer to the model water efficient landscape ordinance. That's a really good example of materiality and water use, or plant materiality and water use. So we defer to that standard, which is also a statutorily moving target. So there's a lot, the risk in combining a lot into a very robust set of standards is that you've got more nexus to other statutory changes. And we're putting all this under one chapter of code. And it's likely that annually, potentially, we could get statutory changes that trickle down that would affect the entire document. This is a very good example of one that it would likely touch. As we grow further and further into drought, it's possible that percentage landscaping and the material that we use to cover a landscape, we would update the model water efficient landscaping ordinance, and right now this document is set up to defer to that chapter.
Was that a yes or a no?
AK, as we get hotter and drier, we may end up moving towards xeriscaping, like we are Arizona.
The answer is maybe. It's not prohibiting grass, but what it is saying is that if you plant grass, you need to meet the model water efficient landscaping ordinance chapter, which is to demonstrate how much water is being used, and you're allowed an aggregate amount for the entire development. So that means you're going to have to economize elsewhere, potentially.
Pardon me, we're going to tag team you here.
Please do.
We all have water meters, so we know how much water is being used, roughly 5,000 gallons for the house for non-outdoor use. But past that, are there any standards that are coming down that are going to mandate from the state to tell us you can't, we don't care what you've got outside, but you can't use more than X amount of water?
Not that I'm aware of, and what we've tried to do in the administrative chapter here is make it clear that annually we're going to be updating this document to catch it, should that be the case.
So, can I add to this? To show where California is going, there is a bill that last year had a lot of traction that said for fire prevention, that created obviously a big uproar, is that the type of landscape as we know it now, with putting shrubs out in front of your house, they wanted to rescind that and say that anything that you plant has to be 5 feet off the front of your house. And of course, it's created a huge uproar, but that's still alive.
I'm simply referring to 2.1B. It's actually at the top of page 48 of the agenda packet. 2.1 is materials. Landscaping materials shall comply with the following. A, shrubs of at least 1 gallon size. B, and this was the source of my question, ground cover instead of grass/turf. And then C, and/or decorative non-living landscaping materials. So it would appear to me that 2.1B, the way I read this, is grass or turf is not allowed.
You're correct. That, by that reading, yes, ground cover as defined in this document would preclude grass or turf.
And that's what I was asking, is that what was intended?
Just
or
to
was
clarify,
this
though, this is about multifamily housing, right?
Right.
Okay, so apartment complexes and so forth.
Well,
And so this is what
Now,
the grass section of this would pertain to, not necessarily single-family homes, right?
this is
no
having
single-family homes apply to the, they're exempt from these standards.
18.50 does not apply to single-family residentials because it's not R1. But
apartment buildings with xeriscape.
not just apartment buildings. If I understand correctly, this also would be the multi-units, the
Duplexes and triplex and fourplex.
duplex, triplex,
Yeah.
the cottage housing, that sort of thing.
It would, yes.
So I wondered if this was some sort of oversight or whether the prohibition against grass or turf in any of those circumstances was intentional.
I think the subcommittee was trying to create a standard. I think, well, to answer your question, I think it was intentional. I don't think this is an oversight. Offhand, I think there are, concession components in here which this possibly could touch on. For example, if an affordable housing project came along and said, I can prove that my project is more or less expensive because of this or any other similar provision than for an affordable housing project, if grass is cheaper than a ground cover, and I was looking to see if it was defined, and I don't recall that it is, then we could potentially grant a concession for turf instead of some other form of ground cover. But in this case, yes, it was intentional to limit the amount of irrigated plant material in development.
And then at page 51 of the agenda packet, paragraph 5.1B, it makes reference to
I'm sorry, what page?
a long-term agreement, but it doesn't indicate what happens when that long-term agreement expires.
I'm sorry, I'm still catching up with your page. What page?
It's on page 51 of the agenda packet, paragraph 5.1B as in Bravo.
Okay, snow storage?
Right.
5.1B, long-term hauling plan is adopted as part of the project. Snow hauling plan demonstrates property owners' snow removal. Okay, and the question is?
I suppose the question is, what's a long-term agreement, number one, and number two, what happens when that long-term agreement expires? And there's no longer a provision for the snow removal.
I would, again, let me just preface this by saying there's a lot here. though objective, there is some discretion involved in most, if not all, of these standards. The intent from the state is for this to be as binary as possible. The discretion is on my behalf to convey to Planning Commission and you on appeal to make findings about all of these. As for this, what I would say to an applicant, I would say, you need to show me a snow hauling program for the life of the project that runs with the land as any other entitlement would.
Well, I was going to suggest changing the language somewhat from long-term to permanent, or as you put it, for the life of the project. I would recommend that change be made, so there's really no ambiguity.
Right. I'd be happy to make that change on the record right now, yeah. I will say that as we dig into details here and we do make substantive changes, we'll need to come back for secondary review, for first reading, waiving of first reading again, but that's
I'm not sure that that's really a substantive change. It's a clarification. And those were the 4 questions I had. Thank you.
Excellent.
So if other council would agree with
Noted the amendment, right? You're ready to make the amendment if you make the motion?
Yes.
Any questions? Tessa, you gonna have any questions?
Jeff, I too noted the zero-scaping or no grass ordinances for R2, R3, particularly duplexes, triplexes. And that, I appreciate you letting us know that's intentional. Is it intentional because we are following state guidelines? Or is this some choice that Mount Shasta is making in and of itself? I'm trying to grasp, in a nutshell, and let me kind of set the context for this. We've all been through really bad droughts for multiple years, 20, 21, 22. But we had watering restrictions. That was the way that we addressed not having enough water, and we have watering restrictions. As compared to, hey, when we've had like the last 2 years and looks like again this year, it's great. You know, it looks like we have plenty of water. Sorry, if you're a kid who happens to be growing up in a duplex or a triplex, you don't get a yard. You got to go to the park. Now, that's not the end of the world. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the context of this. Is this something we really don't have a choice about? Because
we absolutely do have a choice. Yeah, I think it was Planning Commission and particularly the subcommittee's intent to push these standards as far as we possibly could to meet the purpose and intent of other parts of our municipal code that overlap with these standards. So that was used as the water efficient landscape ordinance, and I don't have it committed to memory. I've not applied it since I've been here, but I will say that we could add some clarity to strike that and make the intent clear, which is to be consistent with that section of code, whether it over the course of some annual period would be updated to eliminate or prohibit irrigated landscaping.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you, Mayor, for just a little leeway here. I tend not to focus so much on document coherence, while I understand that, but more simply, what are we trying to do? And I get that we're trying to be more efficient with water. Get it. And one of the benefits that we have living up here in the mountain is we typically have a lot of water. But sometimes we don't, which is why we put in water meters to make sure that we could do water via water meters, which all those numbers go to the city. We could reduce the amount of water that we're using. And meet drought condition realities with water efficiency. And it seems like using code, blanket code, that if you're in a duplex or a triplex, you don't get a yard. I think water efficiency orientations can be addressed in other areas, like through water meters. But I don't want to get off into commentary too much. Thank you, Jeff. But I do have one more question. And
sure.
It's really kind of, we've had the advantage of hearing this for a long time, at least a year. Would you be so kind as to just to give one or two or three of the big headlines of the advantages of having objective standards versus the previously what we had as the subjective standards? What big kind of headline benefits that brings to everybody here in the town?
I think the most important is that it preserves what we have tried for a long time to articulate as small town character. It does so by creating a set of design standards that regulate mass, scale, and form, to break it up into smaller bits, right? We understand that the community identifies with porous views through development of our astounding natural assets. We want to keep that porosity, the gaps between buildings, so those corridors are there. I think that's the leading one. It does it in many ways. Conversely, from the outside in, I think it sets a degree of transparency and predictability to the review process. So that's going to help developers, property owners understand with clarity, objectivity, in a pass-fail kind of way, without the fear of discretion that someone doesn't like purple, to move more rapidly through the process. So that's two sides of my first headliner. Todd, do you have
on a, as a summation, in simple terms, it is, if you've got a development, you've got a list, obviously, of objective design standards. It either fits or it doesn't. What it does is eliminates the argument of this isn't the mountain theme, and going down the rabbit hole of why it isn't the mountain theme. Can you bring me in swatches to show the types of materials that you want to use, and to a level that for the layperson out there, it wastes time, and it gets continued often over tiny esoteric standards that are wholly arbitrary.
Yeah, I think to Todd's point, to maybe further that a little, is that the previous architectural standards, 2010 and prior, back in the 80s, decidedly tried to convey this mountain theme. It didn't go as far as setting up a set of standards. I want to be clear that the document here sets up a set of aspirational components to that character, defining feature. It doesn't set up some measurable standards to achieve Mountain Village theme. But what it does do is it breaks it down on page 54 under the purpose statement, which does reference the literal standard itself created back in the 80s, and then translates it for kind of bite-sized pieces. And really what it does is break it down into all-weather protection. By necessity, mountain communities historically built with materials that were available locally. And they did so for all-weather protection. So steeper roof pitches, more overhangs, balconies over entrances. Some of the design details were a bit conjectural over time. They were not part of the original Mountain Village theme. Stamped out configurations on shutters, for example, details on the end of eave braces and overhangs, expressed structure, etc. All these things kind of came about over time. It was the design committee's intent to convey the bare bones of Mountain Village theme through that all-weather protection that I mentioned. There are a few others, but not go so far as to prescribe doilies, stamp outs, and other conjectural patterning, which didn't really meet their definition of this Mountain Village theme, but rather to allow some creativity to flourish within the mass scale form standards that are really driving the guts of this document.
Thank you, everyone, for questions and answers. So let's move. Oh, well, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, Jeff, I think you and the Planning Commission did a great job on this. I still have questions about that 2.1B. Ground cover instead of grass turf. What would qualify as ground cover that's not grass or turf?
I didn't finish my search here internally, but it's possible that we define ground cover in the definitions section. Let me see if we did or not. It doesn't appear as though ground cover is defined. Let's see. Yeah, we are silent on the definition of ground cover. So the choice is either to eliminate the reference to turf, to define ground cover, to include something other than turf. It's a standard definition. It would be easy enough to find. I've seen it elsewhere, or both. I think that would be non-substantive enough to move this along.
So, Tim, are you looking at a definition regarding vegetative ground cover versus gravel and rocks, that type of thing?
Yes, that was my intent in the question. Because you do have provisions for play area in some of these housing situations. And I'm concerned about the no grass. I mean, maybe it's all clover or wildflowers.
How about unirrigated? How about adding the word, non-irrigated? If ground cover is defined as non-irrigated vegetative material, that would, you could put turf in and call it, right, clover and not irrigate it, or grass and not irrigate it.
Yeah, I think that'd be fine. I'm seeing at least one or two nods, yes.
No, absolutely no.
Oh, I'm seeing an absolute no over here to my right.
Now, may I say, there's a little more context in the commentary. We did discuss this at length, and I think the other issue that came up was snow removal. Because typically what we're talking about are multifamily projects which are managed by organizations, not individuals. There is a bit of pride of occupancy instead of pride of ownership, which drives a little bit of maintenance, but for the most part, this is contracted maintenance. and they're coming in with mechanical equipment to remove snow from private property where the city doesn't do that, right? Turf takes a beating, and so I think the idea was that something else that was not turf, that was more resilient seasonally, particularly if unirrigated. Now, what we didn't do is go so far as to actually define that, and I think you've got a really good point to make, is even so, if we're not explaining or defining what ground cover is, it is a little confusing. There could be some resolution to clarify that. Yeah.
Are we getting into commentary about it, or are we?
No, I think we've exhausted and we'll have to bring it back for whether we want to amend that particular section. Okay, so let's move on to public hearing now, and we'll come back to amendments to the current standard and whether they're substantial enough to warrant a new first reading 2 weeks from now. I'm trying to avoid that, but it depends on how complicated it gets. All right, so public hearing now for this item. And you have 3 minutes. Anyone? Any takers? Yeah, come on up. State your name and where you live.
Casey Glaubman, right here in Mount Shasta. I just have a question about something you said for developers. An exception could be granted to the prohibition on grass if they can prove that grass is cheaper than alternatives. Is the developer required to provide like an exhaustive list of things they looked at, or is there a set list?
Yeah, there's something in state law right now, which is connected to the density bonus housing law, which has been around since the 70s. What it does is require that developers make an argument for waiving or conceding any component in our municipal code, not just this, but anything.
Gotcha.
Okay, any requirement that they can prove gets in the way of them building the density they're due because it's affordable. So that's part one, that's concession. Waivers are defined differently. Those are things that, if applied, increase the cost of the delivery of that product to the market. Sure. Build it, lease it, et cetera. There's a moving target on the requirement of that developer. It used to be that you got to provide us a pro forma. You got to demonstrate that a unit of this costs less than a unit of that. Yeah. If that's the case, then we say yes, we waive a unit of that. That's been challenged. Developers no longer have to come to us and say we prove by pro forma that it is more expensive. We sort of have to take their word for it. So if they do come in and they say, yeah, we want to put gravel in our front yard, these apartments, instead of a xeriscaped, or turf, to your point, then yeah, we would have to take their word for it and waive whatever is costing more for that development.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have a second person to talk about this? Objective design standards, any interested parties? Okay. Going once, twice, 3 times. We are back to council to clarify the items that have been mentioned. Go ahead.
Jeff, because, and council members, because we've had a long time with this, I'm not necessarily concerned about pushing it back one more meeting. What I am concerned about, and it just happens to be a focus of mine, is kids. I've raised kids here in this town. I've got grandkids who come here in this town, and having no yard, because they ain't playing in xeriscape or on gravel. I guess I just need to be very clear about this. I absolutely oppose telling any homeowner that they cannot have a yard if they happen to live in a duplex or a triplex instead of a single-family home. I think that's ridiculous. We have ways. I fully simultaneously support water use efficiency. That's why we put in water meters, so we can change our water usage and put in watering restrictions should we need to. But I don't think throwing out yards of whatever size that have grass in them so kids can play on them makes sense to me. Now, if I'm wrong about this, Jeff, please.
I do need to push back a little.
That's what I count on you for.
Yeah, within the building type standards, yards, that is both active and passive amounts of open space, are very clearly described here. That the intent by the subcommittee and planning commission was to provide the ground plane outside for common and private use.
Right.
There's dimensions here. There are actually components to the features within that area.
Yep.
The only, so to play, kids playing, we're trying to provide the ground area for that to happen via these standards.
Am I misunderstanding that the bottom line is there cannot be any grass that those kids are playing on?
Right. There has to be something else other than turf. Now, to your point, I mean, it seems to me a limit, just strike and replace grass or turf and let them, or define ground cover to be non-irrigated plant material. Or if you want to irrigate it, leave it irrigated.
We've all lived here. We've lived here long enough, and you well know, if you don't irrigate something that's on the ground, it becomes dirt. Mm-hmm. It will die. You have no option to put ground cover that kids are going to run around and kick a ball on and play on and have no irrigation. Will not work. But believe me, I tried it. We moved here. There was no yard in the back. We had no irrigation. The weeds didn't even make it.
Yard in the back with no irrigation, and the grass grows fine because I live on it's very marshy land. You know where I live. So it varies from place to place. But to interject, multifamily housing implies that if there are kids, there'll be possibly several kids playing on the surface. I think if you want, Jeff, then you want something stated or struck out of this design standard that leaves it up to the developer to design a play area that's functional, and which may imply no grass whatsoever, because it's hard to maintain grass on heavy usage. So they might go with an artificial grass, right? And that's pretty popular, actually, and so forth. So you guys here to my left need to not necessarily get to the point, but if you want to amend this, let's go.
I'd like to eliminate 2.1B.
I would second that, but I'd like to get a clarification. If we eliminate 2.1B, I don't think that means that a developer can, it doesn't say anything about the ground cover. It just says has to have shrubs or other decorative non-landscaping material as part of the project. It doesn't either prohibit or permit the grass. Would that be a correct interpretation?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second that amendment.
So does the planning director have clarity on the amendment?
I do, striking 2.1B in section 2 of
Does the
landscape.
director think it's sufficient cause to delay first reading?
I don't believe so.
Does anybody disagree on this council?
I just want to make sure that it won't delay it, number one. Number two is, did the planning commission have a reason for putting it in that we aren't wrapping our heads around?
I've tried to dredge my recall of all 16 of those meetings, and this came up maybe once.
Okay.
To your point, the intent, and it's clear elsewhere in this particular section, that the intent was to provide standards that accessorized outdoor amenity to the degree that these are as livable as they possibly can be, without going too far down the discretionary path and the opacity path, so that from the inside it's not livable, and from the outside we don't know what you want, Mount Shasta, we'll build somewhere else. So it's a fine line Generally, I think globally, this document does an excellent job of doing that. And we tried wherever possible to align the code vertically so that within the municipal code, this reinforced everything else and did not conflict with it. And this is an example where the M. Wheelo chapter, Modern Water Efficient Landscape chapter, what the intent of the Planning Commission was really to defer to that chapter on species, on watering, etc., not get in the way of it. I think this is a very wise move to take this out, because now what they're going to need required to do is they can do whatever they want. As long as they're meeting their water allotments, they can irrigate their grass if they want. They might lose it on the apple trees in the backyard.
Okay. To my right, any further comments? Jeff? Further comments? Would you like to make motions, Burns?
The motion was made and I seconded it.
For the amendment.
The amendment.
There are two.
Oh, yes, okay.
There were two amendments,
On
right?
that amendment.
Okay, so,
Do we
we
take
have
one
an
at a time?
amendment, motion, and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And aye, any opposed? All right, so the motion is made, and now we move on to the first reading. Motion.
Okay.
Yes.
Give you some comment.
Move that we move the first reading to,
He has to get back to this place.
let's see, where are we here? Page up.
Page 51 on yours.
Okay, here we go. I move that we approve the exemption to CEQA and move the amendment, the proposed amendment, ordinance amending Mount Shasta Municipal Code, Title 18, zoning, adding Chapter 18.50 Objective Design Standards to the second reading,
Second.
as amended.
Second. As amended.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And aye, any opposed? Move to a second reading unanimously. And Planning Director, you're happy with the clarity on the
I
amendment?
am, very clear. Thank you.
All right, very good. So that is item number 9. We're moving on to item number 10. This is regarding our EIFD, which is Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District. And this is the point where the council approves the plan. We will hand this over to City Manager for introduction.
Yeah, those of you recall that in September 2023, we passed a resolution of intent to pursue the formation of an enhanced infrastructure finance district. And so, part of that pursuit has included determining the parcels that will be included in a tax increment finance district under EIFD, which we have, and we have the appropriate maps that meet state law that have been approved, engineer's map and surveying document. And what we have that has resulted from that map is the development of an infrastructure finance plan that lists the parcels that are in the proposed EIFD and the types of projects that can be developed using the proceeds from tax increment finance. And if it makes sense for me to define tax increment finance, again, I can do that after I go through this. And so what we are doing here via resolution, if it passes, is with the approval of the infrastructure finance plan, aka the parcels that are listed as making up the enhanced infrastructure finance district. we are de facto saying that we're also approving the formation of a Mount Shasta EIFD that satisfies State Board of Equalization requirements for the formation of the district so they can certify us. Now, with that said, if we approve the resolution tonight for the formation of the EIFD and approval of the infrastructure finance plan that drives that, we still have 2 public meetings of the Public Finance Authority where those parties that have parcels that are part of this infrastructure finance plan can comment, they can protest, they can ask for changes. It was recommended by Cosmont that this approval and vote be taken between the first public hearing of the Public Finance Authority, which happened, and the remaining 2. So we're here, and we've talked about this ad infinitum about that formation, and we're here to approve a resolution stating that we're approving the infrastructure finance plan, which in essence is approving us to move forward with the formation of the district.
So as the city manager said, this does not end the setup process for the EIFD. That will happen in early January, I believe.
What that does is says we've satisfied all the requirements of the state for the formation of the board. We send our packet of information that shows that we've crossed all our T's, dotted our I's, and the State Board of Equalization then has everything they need, according to Cosmont, to certify us as having a rural tax increment finance district.
Okay. So for clarification, who has questions? Yes, Mr. Stearns, go ahead.
As you know, I've long been in favor of this EIFD, and I am still in favor of the EIFD very much. I do have questions. If you have page 110, table 1 handy, I'd ask you to turn to that. My guess is that what has been put together in this table and the pages that follow are a very conservative plan for development and calculating the tax benefits of this development. I have concerns that when I look at this, it talks in terms of 160 market rate residential units being developed over the next 45 or 50 years.
Yeah.
And a total of 40.
15 years.
And a total of.
15.
Well,
right.
The entire plan period. And 40 affordable housing units being developed at the rate of 4 affordable housing units per year. I would hope that that's not the city's actual intent in going forward, because we have all expressed the need for affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And 4 units per year, with the first 4 units coming online in 2028 and 4 more units the following year, is not going to satisfy our needs.
Correct. And the way to read this is exactly what you stated in your preamble, is this is a conservative estimate of minimal development that happens over a period of time. And essentially, this can be a mix or match situation. And if we if the way things are going, say the landing gets off the ground, and we have to go, as an example, we've got to go through the Surplus Lands Act. We'll likely have this EIFD in place, and we'll meet the goals of affordable housing in that first go with the landing as part of one of the parcels within that EIFD. And we'll have more likely on the books. What happens here, though, is we need to pay attention to what the goals are of the community in what we choose to develop, but we also have to be smart in the mix of the types of development that we choose, because ultimately tax increment finance only works when you take projects like affordable housing that doesn't produce any increment and mix it with projects that are most likely, if you invest in them, to produce the highest increment, so then you can do other projects, including more affordable housing.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, let me just clarify for everyone here. So this chart on page 110, above the chart, it says build out and absorption of these land uses are forecasted in the first 15 years of the district lifetime. So this is a very conservative estimate by Joe Cosmont. He's the author of this, not Todd.
Yeah, Joe Dieguez is like
Joe from Cosmont.
Excuse me. The idea here is to set your expectations extremely low. Very under promise and over deliver.
Yeah. So I would hope that most of these goals, the housing and the hotel, would be met within 5 years. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, just for clarification.
That's how I interpret it. I want to make sure. I didn't want to make any assumptions.
Yeah.
And looking at the values per unit, for example, he has market rate residential at being $250,000 per unit. I'm thinking not really.
Right. Yeah.
But that would be on the low side for purposes of.
That would be 60. That would be 60 to 100 MFI, which is almost impossible to get to pencil. I mean, so if you're looking at that as market rate, again, this is so conservative, it borders on absurd, especially with market rates increasing.
I wanted to hear that from staff, so thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, through this whole process, I thought that Joe Diega, okay, for some reason I thought his last name was Cosmont, but anyhow, was, you did too? Yeah, I thought his numbers were way too conservative. The valuations were way, I mean, he's almost looking at deflationary environment.
Yes.
Where we're looking at 2008 collapse.
And he knows.
Is he forecasting that? I don't know.
Offline conversations, he knows that. He is setting the bar so low that
there's lack of disappointment later. Yeah,
it would be very hard to criticize any forward movement.
Yeah.
Good.
And this also takes into account part of the EFD is hundreds of acres north of Spring Hill.
I have no other questions.
Okay. So I'm very bullish on this. Cheap land that hopefully somebody's interested in developing. Question? No. All right. So, okay. So this is not a public hearing. This is public comment oriented, if I'm not mistaken. I've turned the page. So we'll go to public comments on this item. This is an EIFD approval of the infrastructure financing plan by the council. Would anyone like to comment on it? I know it's a somewhat unusual plan, but if you're familiar at all with redevelopment, this is sort of a rehashing of redevelopment that was ended in 2011 or 2014. Yep. And this is a very restricted resurrection of that type of program here in California.
But still effective.
Yeah.
Quentin.
Yeah, Quentin Gaddy, Director of Business Development for Siskiyou Economic Development. I'm one of the few people in the county who actually knows everything that's in this plan and how it works and whatnot. Very enthusiastic that the city is moving forward on this and would encourage you to vote to move forward on this. Mount Shasta would likely be the smallest EIFD in the state of California at this point. So as you mentioned, it is like redevelopment. Essentially, you can't touch any school district funds at all. I was really disappointed that the county did not participate, and I am optimistic that they change their mind at some point in the future as they see development happen and they realize that, they want to get on board. We still want to maintain, whatever we can do as an organization to help facilitate that. We're also encouraging the city of Wairika to look at this as a tool for some of their future development. It is a part of the capital stack. It's not gonna, do it all, but when you combine it with some of these different other infill financing things, like what you were mentioning with K2 and some of these other funds, they can help projects move the needle. Additionally, if there are things that don't work, there's like, hey, this is why it's not working in a rural community, or these are things that could be better. This is stuff that we should be taking up to legislature. The California legislature has already, revised this law 2 or 3 times. The most recent one allowed them to include the increased cost of services that comes from expanded infrastructure to be part of EIFD funding. So we're still here as a partner to support this project moving forward. We want to see it, close out and be established. As Todd did mention, these are very, very, very conservative estimates, but if you ever want to, bond it out in the future, it's best to, have that conservative estimate in place. We just also want to express that, we're an extension of your team. So if you ever have any questions on how some of these mechanics work, or ever interested in other tax financing districts like community resilience districts in the future, please reach out to us at Siskiyou Economic Development. We'd be happy to discuss those. So thank you.
And thank you for the vote of confidence. Appreciate that. Other speakers on this item? Okay, we'll close public comment on this item and move to further discussion or a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
All right, if you want to read the resolution wording, it's on page 100.
I have it here in front of me.
It's number 31.
I move adoption of resolution or approval of resolution number CCR 24-13, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount.
31.
Oh, I'm sorry. I move approval and adoption of resolution CCR 24-31, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta, California, approving the infrastructure financing plan for the Mount Shasta Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District and the allocation of the city's incremental property tax revenue within the Mount Shasta Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District pursuant to Government Code Sections 53-398.68 and 53-398.75.
Second.
By title only.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And aye. Any opposed? 5-0 vote. Borrow this page for a second. And we will move on to number 11. Number 11 is a one-year renewal of the Humane Society contract, and it's Todd? Okay, Todd, go ahead and introduce this.
So I've got jumbled paperwork, so I'm going to go from memory. Our contract with the Humane Society has been expired for a while, and we had a number of differences that we wanted to work out with them. The Humane Society is moving from a per animal to a flat rate structure for the care and feeding of stray and nuisance animals, and some of our costs are recouped in return and licensing fees and other fees that are required before we give back an animal to an owner. But it's the way they're moving, and we've seemed to have worked out all our differences in the way that we make it most efficient for both entities, as well as for those that are seeking to their return of their animals and making sure that they've got a way to pay their fees in an efficient way. And I think this is a pretty good model moving forward.
Okay, do you remember, or do you have in mind when the last time we contracted with the Humane Society? It seems not too long ago.
What the
How long
rate-
how long has the break been?
It's been, I think it's out of, do you know offhand? I think it was 8 months.
Oh, so it's
Okay.
this year. Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Questions? Yes. I do. Okay.
So how much did the city pay in the prior year or the prior 2 years annually? And how does this compare to that? Because this is $10,000 plus additional costs.
I'm not finding it in my documents. It is more money. The gist is that when the Humane Society proposed a flat fee model, they were asking for additional money. This is what we were able to negotiate it down. I did research, called Shasta Lake City that runs their own pound. I've called around. Yreka is not willing to take additional animals. It really, right now, is the only game in town unless we want to become our own shelter owners. And the cost and seeking out grants to get us started on that, and then the operating cost is absolutely cost prohibitive. So it's really our only choice.
Melissa, do you have some numbers for us?
I believe what we paid last year was around.
Melissa, could you get closer to the mic, please?
Yes, I believe last year, I'm looking it up, but I believe it was around $2,500 what we paid them last year.
About $2,500 a year that we paid in the past.
And so this is not to exceed, so it could be less than, or expected, or is it more
It's
expect to
likely
pay?
we're paying that $10,000.
You know, this would be a flat fee of $10,000 plus if dogs or if pets are taken to the shelter after 5 p.m., it would be an additional 2-hour minimum of $50 per hour.
That's correct.
It also provides that the city would be responsible for vet fees for an unknown amount of money.
But we were on the hook for that already because the Humane Society doesn't, they don't provide veterinarian fees.
And it also provides, which I think is interesting, paragraph 4.4 of the proposed agreement says the Humane Society keeps all impound and boarding fees. And I'm thinking, well, if this is substantially more than in the past, if we're paying a base rate of $10,000, why should we not get some credit or offset of the impound and boarding fees?
They wanted substantially more. In fact, their original out the gate was requesting that the city subsidize the Humane Society at $100,000 a year.
That would be bigger than we pay at the museum and things.
And I told them to pound sand. But what it really comes down to is this. It's a big shift. It provides certain operating revenues for the Humane Society. It does bother me that the expectation is on the back of the city, because we're not here in the business of propping up a nonprofit as much as we appreciate their mission. But we don't have another choice unless we decide that as a city, we're no longer picking up animals.
So in other words, we go internal with this and we set up our new department or a sub-department of the police department.
Yeah.
Which will be way more than $10,000 a year. Way more. Yes. Okay.
And when these
that's one staff member, that's way more than $10,000 a year.
Right. But in all these elements that you've brought up, my irritation level when this was originally proposed, this has been whittled down. I'm still not particularly happy with this, but we're over a barrel.
Let me ask one more question.
Yeah, sure.
I hear, and your concerns are my concerns also, or vice versa.
Yep.
This contract is for an agreement that starts November 1st and ends June 30th. That's an 8-month period. Is Humane Society expecting that in the 25-26 year that starts July 1st, 25, that
Yep.
it would be increased by
5,000.
1/3?
Yep.
Is that an expectation that they have, or are they agreeable to staying at 10,000?
That their expectation is it goes up. Their expectation is it goes up.
Come June, they want, yeah, that's it. Come June.
Yeah, we're subsidizing the Humane Society. I don't want to speak completely. I know that Melissa in Oregon had a lot of experience negotiating these contracts, and she's been kind of an intermediary in saying, well, these are a reasonable cost of the Humane Society. I don't know if you want to add anything to this discussion.
So I did find the numbers from last year, and we paid roughly $1,500 a quarter for their services. So the prior contract was very cumbersome and administratively burdensome, where the police officers would take the animal to the shelter, and then while the animal was there, the fees would start to be generated. They would have to, the owner would have to come to the police department, pay the fees, take the receipt back down to the Humane Society. Once the Humane Society then saw that they proved that they paid to get their animal back, then they would release the animal to the owner. But prior to releasing an animal, now there's a lot of laws around that, and for agencies to microchip animals, vaccinate them upon intake, and if they continue to hold the animal and it becomes their property, they also are required to spay and neuter before they can adopt. So it's very expensive to hold animals and then rehome them if they don't get picked up by their owners. So this money that we were paying to the Humane Society was actually money that was being collected from the owners that dogs were impounded, and then we were passing that on to the Humane Society. So in effect, we really were kind of at a net zero, if you will, because the owner was paying those fees, and then we in turn administratively paid them back to the Humane Society. That didn't give them any reimbursement for animals that were not picked up. And there is a lot of burden on Humane Societies or any agency that holds animals and wants to rehome them. So in other words, if an animal gets picked up in the city limits and no owner is found, and we don't have the Humane Society to hold them, we are responsible because we have an animal control jurisdiction. And we would then have to be appropriately housing them. We would have to microchip them. We would have to get them a rabies vaccination. We don't have a veterinarian. And then we would have to, before we adopt them, have them spay and neutered. So they're asking for a $10,000 flat fee to manage all of that on the city's behalf.
So
and I do believe that they will ask for an increase. They did tell me.
That's obvious, but all those steps you just mentioned would be cut out with this? No.
Oh, no.
We still going to have to get, we're going to have, we're going to still have to collect from the owners and pass it on to.
No.
That's what I'm saying. There's going to be a simplification as part of this.
You're right.
So is that clear to everyone? The administrative simplification here? No, apparently not.
No.
That's zero, she's saying.
Right, so we will no longer collect the fees from the owner. The Humane Society will do that.
Do we get a rebate?
No.
So we're basically, so it's a new deal. Instead of having a per animal contract, we're going to a set fee for a service instead of, since we are obligated to have an animal control program, instead of setting up our own program where that sounds like at least one job, and that one job alone is going to be $45,000 a year. Yeah. So there's no comparison. This is a very affordable way of handling our obligations with respect to an animal control district. Is that what you said?
Well, and I want to be clear, we would need to go legal on this, but I don't believe we have to have an animal control district, but we do have an animal control program. So
And so the alternative is saying to the community, which seems to be a non-starter,
based
that
on what
stray
happened a few days
animals,
ago.
especially animals that are prone to bite, and saying, well, we're not picking them up any longer, you're on your own, that seems to be a recipe for,
Shooting of animals in
will.
public. Well, it's right. Wild animals lead, if there's no program, it can lead to the shooting of animals in public. Yeah, no question. Sad but true.
It is.
Can we just do a meat packing plant?
So that's not cheap either.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So the choice is simple. We hire someone, if not the Humane Society, we hire someone else. Or we set up a kennel. We have to set up a kennel. We have to have an employee.
Before we get into discussion,
So I would go to public.
my questions have been answered, and you want to open up for public comment.
And we have two people in the audience. Would either one like to speak? Name and city of residence.
Wendy Warnick, City of Mount Shasta. What happens down the line in terms of a ceiling on how much the contract can be increased each time it needs to be renewed?
I guess what I would say is they're a nonprofit, they're their own, they can set their request to us, and then it's our, decision to decide how we want to move forward with that. But I don't know that we could place a ceiling specifically. I'm not sure how that would work.
Okay, thank you.
So, Casey, no comment. Okay. So, bring it back to council. Along those lines, the answer to that question would be to enter into a long-term contract where there's escalators incorporated. So, this is a 3/4 year contract. So the next one decided on in May or June should maybe be a 3-year contract with escalators already predetermined. But
Discussion.
anyhow.
I will vote in favor of this because it is a 8-month contract, and I think it's subject to renegotiation and review 6 months from now.
Someone do we have further comments? Yep.
And during the next 8 months, if there's any way to look at consolidation in South County services, so we're not over the barrel, so to speak, where there's one provider and that's it, and they've got us. As compared to maybe Dunsmuir and Weed, they probably have the same service. Do they have their own facilities? Can we combine facilities?
Dunsmuir has a cement pad with a fence next to the wastewater treatment plant that they have to pay wastewater treatment plant operator of that choosing that's on the schedule overtime to stick around and feed those animals. They don't have any additional space, nor do I think it meets state standards for housing animals.
Okay, so that's not an option, and then McLeod might have something. The service district.
Yeah, I don't know if they do. Weed has a similar setup to Dunsmuir. Wairika has a shelter. They're just not willing to take animals, and The issue, that, and we would, and if they would, we'd consider it, especially if it wasn't cost prohibitive. The thinking or the thing to take into account there is you're paying an officer time to be on the road to deliver that animal. When the cost annually is cheaper, but right now they're not willing to take that on. And we can negotiate with them to see, we could pay to help them expand it and run it, but we have no idea if, until we had a proposal, whether we're actually saving any money. But if the Humane Society is still planning these large escalators, or a large increase, and we see a long-term lease with escalators, we need to weigh that while we're talking to Wairika to see if they're willing to do this. And all in, are we still saving money?
So does Wairika use the rescue ranch, or they have their own in-house program?
I believe they have their own in-house program.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are we clear? Would someone like to make a motion? It's CCR 2432. It's on page 173. Everybody ready? Besides myself? Come on, people.
I move to approve resolution CCR-24-32, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Siskiyou Humane Society and approving budget adjustment number 24-2501, appropriating $10,000 from the general fund for animal services.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And aye. So any opposed? City manager / clerk, that is a 5-0 vote. And we will move on to number 12, I believe. I got it now. I figured how to use my computer, yes. This is the only thing I use it for, so the learning curve was a little too long. Okay, change order to Springbrook software. Surprisingly, this is not yours, Melissa?
With both of ours.
Yeah.
You want to start? Go ahead, Todd.
Sure. Well, it's my understanding that Jody and Melissa were at a training, and they determined that the project management module that we were sold isn't doing what we need it to do, and we would like to swap that module out for both the project management and accounts receivable. So we would get a credit for returning the project management module, and the difference in cost is $2,765.
Any further comments? Pretty clear. Questions?
Nope. No questions. Get it done.
Tessa, you're into this subject. What do you think? We're on that ad hoc committee.
I mean, I think it needs to be done.
I'm just curious, what was wrong with the program we're trading in? How did it fail?
No, we didn't implement the project management part of the module. After we implemented the initial part of the financial suite, I realized that we didn't have accounts receivable and purchase orders, which will help us with grant tracking.
Right.
I have experience with project management in ERP before, and when we implemented it, we scrapped it because it's pretty labor intensive. And so I think we can get the same out of purchase orders and AR modules going forward, and then, hopefully we don't.
Okay, so the project management, I'm just curious, because we're obviously going to pass this, but so we're talking about like water system projects?
No, it's a module in the finance software that tracks projects like the wastewater treatment project, but I can do that with accounts receivable and purchase orders the same way. And
so you find that simple enough that you don't need
For the project management module, only I would have access. For the other modules, all the finance staff will have access, and that will help as well.
So to sum up, this is a very reasonable, cost-effective, and helpful change order. So, any further questions before we take it to public comment by the one person left? Okay, public comment. Casey, you good? All right.
We're closed.
Anybody want to make a motion? This is CCR
32? 33?
Yep. Page 181 if you want help.
Move that city council, let's see, what page am I on?
181.
There we go. Move approval of resolution CCR 24-33, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Springbrook and approving budget adjustment for software totaling $2,765 by title only.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And aye. Any opposed? That passes 5-0. Mr. City Manager / Clerk, we move on to reports on outside meetings. Tessa and I did go to a meeting of the PFA, Public Financing Authority, and that was regarding what we talked about in item number 10, I believe. That was the EIFD. So nothing more to be said there. We have several meetings coming up. We'll report back on that at the end of November. And unless anybody else has reports, we'll move on to future agenda items. Let's add to the future agenda items what was that, $5,000 for the museum donation? So that's Jean Nils, I assume, requesting, and now that's a regular thing, so I don't know if she's late with that. She usually makes a presentation, so maybe she should come in and do that. We'll vote on it. You think so?
Yes, Jean did contact me, and she does have a presentation ready when we're ready.
That's how she usually does it.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, we'll put her on the next agenda.
And then I've got one for way out in January. This would be from Shannon here of the Rec District. She's looking for a grant from the city to rebuild part of the T-ball Little League field that is falling apart. And she said her rationale is part of the city, and we ought to get involved. Hard to say no to that, so that's $13,000. So we'll see how we're doing. I think at the end of January, hopefully we'll have mid-year numbers by then, but maybe the first week of February, see how we're doing and whether we can handle a budget adjustment of $13,000.
You said 15?
13,000.
13, okay.
Yeah. All right, she just sprung that on me today, so.
Okay.
To the chair?
Yeah.
I see that the certification of election results and swearing in will be on 12/9. I am traveling for the last time for at least several months to Nashville that day. I can join via Zoom, either that, or can we move it up to our next November meeting?
No, it has to.
It has to be that
It
first
has to be
meeting?
certified. It'll be certified
Oh,
on
okay.
December 5th.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will need Zoom link and access
Jeremy,
to
can you do that?
participate.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Just for
Because you want to be there, Tessa. It's a big one.
For information, I will be in San Francisco on 12/9.
Oh, okay, so you'll be on Zoom too?
No, he'll be out.
Oh, you're out.
Yeah, that's his seat.
I will be in the
You're gonna
meeting
be there.
for about 5 minutes, so I would respectfully request you accept my absence on that day.
Well, thanks for your service in advance, and we'll re-thank you at the next meeting. How many years is this? 24? Okay. This is my last one, by the way.
Never say never.
No.
3 terms.
3 terms is good. It's good. So, would anyone like to continue this meeting?
Nope.
That being said, we are concluded at
Hey, and thanks everyone for
7:29.
the heavy lift on the EIFD. It's been a long.
No, thank you.